Well, hi folks, Sty again. Time for Sty Stories. I'm putting this under the Sty Stories category, um, and I'm calling it Tiger Tales because these aren't actual real life experiences and stories. What I'm doing, this is really just for the fun of it. I'm trying to get a few videos out. It's been over a week since I've had a chance to even make videos. Um, it's been so busy. My so-called part-time job has been working out to almost all the time. So I haven't had the opportunity to make videos like I want to. But the more work I do now, the less I'll probably have to do over the summer when I want to be in the woods all the time. Um, so it is what it is. So Tiger Tales. Oh, before I get started, I want to mention a friend of ours, and for those that haven't been there to his channel, go over and check his channel out. Bentley's Backwoods Bushcraft. Richard over there at Bentley's Backwoods Bushcraft, he's trying to promote his channel, which we all try to do. Um, and instead of going with the stickers, a lot of people are making stickers that represent their channels and sending them all around. Um, he came up with a different idea, and what he did was he came up with a laminated card that basically has his channel logo on it, to promote his channel. And he's made his first batch of them, and he mailed them out to the people that he had addresses for. And I saw a video about him making those cards on his channel, and he said, "Now get these out as soon as possible." Well, I was no more than done watching the video, and I heard the mailman drop the mail out in the mailbox. So I went out and checked the mail, and lo and behold, I got one. He sent me one of his logo cards. They're really neat, laminated card. It's got the YouTube start button logo on the back and his channel logo on the front. It's got a little string lanyard on it. I'm thinking of hanging this from the mirror in the truck. Not sure. But I want it out where people can see it and hopefully go over and check Bentley's Backwoods Bushcraft out. But I want to thank you, Richard, for sending this to me. I can't believe it. I realized when I watched your video, after I found this in the mail, I went back and looked at the video again. You had posted that video the day after you made it. And that's the day I watched your video. And that's the day this came in the mail. All the way from his state to mine. Just like that. It's wonderful. Thank you, Richard. Okay, let's get on with the Tiger Tales. What does Stein mean by Tiger Tales? Well, okay, I think all of us have experienced some old boy telling you a little tale, telling you a leg puller, a story that it's just too out there to believe, right? Old boys have a habit of doing that to younger folks. So I came up with a half a dozen tales or stories that I've heard over the years from old boys that have nothing better to do than spin tales, okay? And I'm just going to go through some of these. Some of these are, yeah, they might be a little lame, I don't know. But they're just tales I've heard from old boys, okay? Now, the first one. Now, this comes from my ex-wife's grandfather. Now, this is way back in the 1970s. And her brothers were just little guys, just little guys. And her her grandfather was a real character. And they asked him, those two of her brothers, her two boys, little boys, asked their grandpa, Grandpa, why aren't there any elephants in North Dakota? And old Elmer, he just started laughing. He goes, boys, he said, there used to be elephants in North Dakota. And they said, well, why aren't there any in North Dakota now? And he goes, don't tell anybody, but I shot them all. You know, those boys believe their grandpa shot all the elephants in North Dakota for years. Yep, there you go. Be careful what you tell those kids. He had them believing it. He shot all the elephants in North Dakota. That's why you'll never find an elephant in North Dakota. The next one. This one comes from my grandfather. When I was just a little guy, we always went to northern Minnesota and camped, hunted, fished. We just loved northern Minnesota and always made annual trips up there, usually 2 or 3 or more a year. Well, we were on a trip up there one year, and I was just old enough to where I was able to start reading, you know, fairly well. And he says to me, he says, you know, back when I was a little boy, which was ages ago, he said, I lived with Native Americans, he said, which is true. And he said, and there's a story about them that I think you should know. He said, the chief of the tribe had a son, just a little fella. And the tribe had a habit of naming children after an event that happened on the day they were born. And the father was out hunting, and someone came and told him, your wife's having her child, you need to get back to the village. So he started running back to the village, and he ran past this big cliff, and a rock came tumbling down that cliff and almost hit him. And he gets back to the village and finds out he has a new son. And he says, I'm going to name my son Falling Rock. And as that boy started to grow up, my grandfather told me, as that boy started to grow up, his father always told him, you stay away from those big cliffs. You could fall off of one of those and get badly hurt, or else you may even die. Plus, it's so easy to get lost amongst those rocks, and we would never find you. Well, that little boy didn't listen. And one day they couldn't find that little boy. And some brave had said, well, the last I saw of him, he was heading towards the cliffs. So they searched and they searched those cliffs, and they never found that little boy. And now, mind you, we're in a car while he's telling me this story, driving along the north shore of Lake Superior in northern Minnesota. And then all of a sudden my grandpa goes, he says, they never found that little boy, but the chief insisted they keep looking for him. And I said, oh, you're full of baloney, Grandpa. I don't believe it. And he says, well, then take a look. And we were just going past this big outcrop of rock. And what did I see? A sign that says, watch for Falling Rock. He says, see, I told you, they're still looking for that little boy by the name of Falling Rock. Okay, the next tale. This is where the Tiger Tales comes in. This is another one that came from my grandfather. I asked him, why don't we ever see any tigers in the woods? And he says, because you can't, he says, tigers are real smart. He said, they won't come out so that you can see them. He says, you have to bait them to get them to come out. And I said, really? How do you bait them? He says, with frosted flakes. Now I wonder where he got that from. Well, you know how those old boys can be with young boys. He had me convinced. I went to the house, got a box of frosted flakes, and I went and dumped that box of frosted flakes out in the woods by our house. And I sat there, that was during the summer, I sat there and I hid in the bushes and watched for a tiger to come out to them frosted flakes for almost a week. Never did see a tiger come out to them frosted flakes. But he insists they're out there, and the only way that you can see one is to bait it with frosted flakes. So there's a tiger tale for you. Okay. This story was told to me by an uncle. He said that he knew these three fellas that they went out hunting together, and they're all going to hunt in different directions. And they headed out of camp, and at the end of the day, the first guy comes dragging a big white-tailed buck deer into camp. And he's just happy as can be. He strings it up on a pole. Second hunter, he comes in. He's got a larger buck than the first guy. He strings that up on the pole. Third guy comes in and says, I didn't see nothing. How did you guys find those deer? Well, here's the trick. The third guy was a city boy. And this is his first time out hunting. He's never hunted before. The other two guys said, it's not that difficult. You just go out there, find some tracks, follow them, and then kill the deer. They said, you'll have better luck tomorrow morning. So the next day, that fella headed out. Well, these two guys are prepping their deer. They waited and waited and waited. He never came back to camp. And so they went to town and reported that they had a missing person, that one of their hunters was missing. And the sheriff asked them, well, what's his name? And they told him his name, and the sheriff said, oh, you're not going to find him. We know where he is. And they said, well, where's he at? And he says, well, he's in the morgue. And they said, what happened to him? And the sheriff says, well, it appears that he was walking down the tracks and he got run over by a train. Okay, there's another one for you. Okay. Here's one for you. Now, this is one from my granddad again. He was terrible for these things. I asked him, Grandpa, what's the best way to catch a grizzly bear? And he says, that's tricky. He says, but here's the best way. He says, you go out in the woods and you dig a big hole, a big pit, really deep. And he says, then you take a can of mixed nuts, peanuts, almonds, cashews, walnuts, mixed nuts, he says. You take a can of mixed nuts, dump that in that hole, then go hide in the bushes. And I said, I don't get it. He says, the thing is, grizzly bears love mixed nuts. He says, and if you hide there in the bushes long enough, a grizzly bear will come in, and he'll look down in that hole, and when he's leaning down over the edge of that hole, run up behind him and just kick him in the nuts. And you got him. Yep. I'm glad I didn't always take his advice. Okay. Here's the last one for you. I heard this from an old boy out in northwestern Montana. I was sitting in a pub chatting with this old fella. He was 96 years old, this boy. And he says, have you ever heard the story about the strongest and bravest man in the world? I said, I doubt it. And he says, well, I'll tell you. He says, there were these two trappers, he said, they lived together in a old trapper shack, and he said it was a long winter, and they were both getting cabin fever, and trapping wasn't so good, and they got to talking back and forth, and the next thing you know, they get in a spat over who's the strongest and who's the bravest. Well, the one fella, he said, there's no doubt that I'm the strongest and the bravest, and the other fella said, well, I've got three things. It, if you do three things for me, then I'll agree. I'll tell the world you're the strongest and bravest man. And that guy says, you can't come up with three things I can't do. And he says, okay, here's the three things. He says, I want you to go over there. He says, you see that mountain, that tallest mountain over there? He says, I want you to go climb to the top of that mountain and back. And he says, and after you do that, he says, then I want you to go find yourself a grizzly bear and kill that grizzly bear with your bare hands. He says, and after you do that, then I want you to go to town and find the prettiest woman on the street, walking down the street, walk up behind her and slap her right on the butt in front of everybody and see what happens. And if you do those three things, he says, by golly, I'll call you the strongest and the bravest man in the world. That old boy, he's just dumb as a stump. He goes, oh, I can do that, and off he goes. Out the cabin he goes. Well, his partner's sitting there waiting, days go by, and all of a sudden it's been a week, and then it's 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden the door flies open, and his buddy comes in, and his clothes are all tore up, he's got blood on him, and he's all beat up looking. And he says to the guy, he says, what in the world happened to you? He says, did you climb that mountain like I told you to? And he goes, yeah, I did. And he goes, and how'd you end up looking like this? And the guy says, oh, I'll tell you the whole story. But first, I want you to tell me, where's this woman you want me to kill? There you go. Where's this woman you want me to kill? Yeah, I think that bear was surprised. So there you go. Some tiger tales, folks. I bet you folks got a bunch of them too. I kind of wish that we had a channel that's all they did was tell tales. So there's your Sty story for the day. This is Sty North saying thanks for tagging along, and you all have a very nice day. Bye-bye.